This is ACC Nation, your source for ACC sports coverage. Connect with us at accnation.net. Listen to our podcast and streaming radio. Watch us on YouTube and follow us on your favorite social media outlet. Now, here's Will and Jim.
Duke Blue Devils football. Welcome to this ACC Nation preview with Connor O'Neill, the publisher of Devils Illustrated, and he's a Heisman voter as well. Welcome, Connor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Glad to be back with y'all.
Always great to have you, man. That's Will Ojanen. I'm Jim Quist. We're going to get into the down and dirty aspect of it first with Will. Let's talk a little bit of offense and defense and see what's to be expected out of Manny Diaz and company.
Yeah, obviously, it was always good to talk to you, Connor. You've been a friend of the show for some time. We always appreciate you coming on. Let's start up top with the offense. A lot of chatter when it happened about Darian Mensah being a huge get for Duke in the portal from Tulane. And quite frankly, to quote Shaq, I am not familiar with your game. So can you tell me what makes him such a big get for Duke?
Yeah, he's a guy that was very lightly recruited. I think his two offers coming out of high school in California were Tulane and Idaho State, and I think the Tulane one was late. And he redshirted his freshman year at Tulane. I don't know that anybody really was expecting much out of him. And then he won a quarterback battle going into last year in his first year of significant experience, or first year of experience at all. He throws for 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I think the sack adjusted rushing yardage was like 250 yards in 13 games. He just was a really efficient, really everything you want out of a quarterback. He was last year, and that's the first year as a starter, and coming from such a kind of lightly known background, he kind of took the AAC by storm, and so he decides to go into the portal, and he's good enough, and he's talented enough, and he's a good enough fit for what Duke wants to do offensively, that Duke looks at him and sees an upgrade in just about every area over a guy that threw for a Duke record 26 touchdowns last year. I mean, that's the single season record for touchdown passes in a season in Duke history. And Duke, depending on whose story you want to read into, and we're probably never going to know the truth of the conversations there, but basically Malik Murphy is told, well, we're going to bring in somebody who we think is a better fit for us and what we want to do. And that's the business of college football and what it's become now.
So normally I would just go down the order running back receiver, but I want to actually go offensive line next because you talk about and let's be honest, this offensive line was much better in pass pro than it was in the run. I think they only gave up something like, was it 14 sacks or something like that in like over 460 attempts, yet they were towards the bottom in yards per carry. Mensah obviously is more of a running threat than Murphy as it ever was. Is that, how much of a factor is that going to be in maybe wanting to run the ball more this year?
It's going to be a big factor. Malik Murphy was not a runner. His first, second, and third reads were all sit in the pocket and make a throw. Um, Duke did some things to manipulate that sacks number and keep it low with getting the ball out of his hand quickly or firing shots 50 yards down the field. That's where a lot of their pass yards came from, and then being able to hit the quick hitters. Um, Darian Mensah might not be able to throw the ball as far as Malik. I don't know if there are many quarterbacks in the country that can throw the ball as far and as hard as Malik when he's on, but it's about having a quarterback who's a running threat in designed rushes, and also who can get outside the pocket and move around, who can relocate, who can make throws off platform is a big thing that quarterbacks talk about now. The off schedule plays. It's just this offense is going to look a lot different because of the skill set of Darian Mensah, and I think that offensive line last year, they were finding their footing. There's no doubt about that. I mean, that we were talking at this time last year about how they had played a spring game with 5 offensive linemen suited up, and they had to play like 7 on 11 for half of the spring game because they just didn't have linemen. It's a completely different story now. Like Brian Parker is a returning starter at right tackle and a possible NFL draft pick. Bruno Fina is an experienced left tackle. Like Matt Craycraft now has a season of starting at center under his belt and returns. Justin Pickett has been a starter for a few years now, and they had to bring in a transfer, Jordan Larson from South Dakota, because they lost a guy in the spring. Micah Sahakian was in line to be a starter, and I don't think they'll have him all year, but they're in a really good spot with the offensive line, and between having a returning nucleus like that and having a quarterback whose skill set is a little more multiple, I think you're going to see a lot more balance of an offense. You're going to see an offense that doesn't routinely get behind the chains, and behind the chains not with sacks because like you said, Will, they didn't give up many of them. But you're behind the chains if you throw an incompletion on first down, like 2nd and 10. You're greatly increasing your percentage of 3 and outs, even compared to if you have a run play for 2 or 3 yards. So it's gonna on paper, we're all on paper now for a month out of the season starting, but it does look like they'll be a lot more efficient.
So with Star Thomas gone, who's taken over in the backfield?
Well, they get Jaquez Moore back. He was the starter last year to start the season. He took an awkward step at Northwestern on that temporary field up there, and we really didn't know it at the time. It feels like we spent half the season asking Manny and getting answers about he was week to week, day to day, that type of thing. He came back for one play against UNC, and then I think that might have been the last time we saw him all year. So they'll get him back for like a senior year part two. He did not have a redshirt year, so last year was his redshirt. Um, I've been high on Peyton Jones the last 2 years. I think he's a budding star. The average per carry and that kind of thing doesn't quite show it, but man, you watch him and you watch him get into space and he can burn. I think that he's due for a breakout season. I picked him to have a breakout year last year, and he had decent numbers for a backup running back, and I put him right back at the top of my list for a story I did earlier in July, and I think he's the breakout star of this offense.
So with the top two receivers in terms of receptions and yardage gone, who's going to step up for the Blue Devils at receiver?
It's it's a two-part answer. You've got two guys that were in the room last year that have shown sparks. Samir Hagans is an experienced guy. He's lacked a little consistency over the last couple of years. I actually thought the end of the 2022 season was his breakout, and then we've only seen pockets of really good production from him in the last few years. Quayshawn Brown is a guy that really emerged last year as a redshirt freshman. He's a quick, elusive guy out of the slot. He's a guy that they'll use on jet sweeps. They'll motion him and try to get him on mismatches. I think he's another one with Peyton Jones I would put there in the breakout category. And then they brought in two guys that need to kind of gel quickly with Darian Mensah, Andrel Anthony from Oklahoma, and I think previously Michigan, and then Cooper Barkate from Harvard. And you would think that a receiver from Harvard is not going to be a great addition. It's not necessarily a place where you see a lot of skill players come out of and excel at the power conference level. But where you would put your confidence is what Duke has done with Ivy League guys. They've churned out some multi-year starters from Ivy League transfers. And as far as like right now and looking at the pedigree, Cooper Barkate was a legitimate like 3-star recruit. He wasn't just a bookworm that wound up at Harvard with some good receiving numbers. I think he is an athlete in every sense of the word now with a Harvard degree. And I think I think between those four, they've got some other guys like Chase Tyler was a freshman last year who got a little bit of a splash of experience, but not much. Maybe he takes a big jump. Um, but really with the top four, with the two returning guys and then the two transfers, I think they'll have some answers at receiver.
All right, let's switch over to the defense, and we'll get into the position groups in a moment. But when you look at this defense, obviously they return quite a bit, but only took three transfers. Is that to say how much Manny Diaz just really likes the personnel on this team?
Yeah, I mean they needed a ton of transfers last year because of the bleeding that happened after Mike Elko left. They had RJ Oben go to Notre Dame. Brandon Johnson went to Oregon. Darian Mausi went to Auburn. I think I'm forgetting one or they got Jalen Simpson back, but you know they didn't have a bloodletting through the transfer portal this year. I think the December portal they only had four exits, and other than Malik Murphy, none of them. Well, Star Thomas, but Star Thomas was the guy in the JUCO litigation stuff that you didn't know if you had an extra year or not. But what I'm saying is that they did not have to go restock the barrel the same way they did going into Manny's first year. So they tried to be really intentional about what they needed and target the right types of guys. They have another Ivy Leaguer in this group with Josiah Green up front at defensive tackle. Um, Caleb Weaver was, I think, an FCS All-American last year at Sam Houston State. Him and Chandler Rivers, the All-American corner, played 7-on-7 growing up together in Texas. Um, and I'm blanking. Who's the third transfer they brought in on defense?
Would it be who do you say? Yeah, Jaden Francois, maybe?
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
that
yeah.
the
Jaden, gosh, I always forget Nichols, and then they wind up being the most important position on the defense. Um, yeah, they you need a nickel, and Jaden he's going to be listed as a linebacker, but Duke plays a 4-2-5, and he's going to play that fifth DB on the field, playing in the box some, and then lining up across slot receivers and matched up on tight ends. So.
Yeah, the line returns three starters, and there's been a lot of talk about, Aaron Hall, Wesley Williams. But one of the concerns I see is the depth behind them. Is there confidence in the depth behind those guys?
I think so. I mean, Preston Watson for a freshman defensive tackle. I never think that you should expect much of anything out of freshman defensive tackles unless they're like five-star, top 20 or 30 national type kids. Preston Watson was really good last year on the PFF numbers as a freshman defensive tackle. And I think he'll be in the rotation with Hall and with Josiah Green. Um, I don't maybe I'm giving a little bit too much grace to a staff that's only been in Durham for 1 year and a staff that's only been together in this iteration 1 year, but I don't worry too much about defensive ends in this system. Like VJ Anthony was a bit of a recruiting miss until last year, and all of a sudden he's able to tap into his potential and he blossomed last year. Wes Williams took a little bit more time to get used to the system that they wanted to play, but in the second half of the year, I thought he was better than VJ Anthony was. If I'm not mistaken, both of them wound up on the All ACC honorable mention, or maybe one of them was on one of the teams. I can't remember, but they lost their backups. I just I tend to think that those will be replaceable snaps. Depending on the recruiting service you look at, the best freshman that they have in X number of years is Bryce Davis, and he's going to play defensive end. And Manny was already singing his praises a little bit at ACC kickoff this week. So I think they'll be fine from a depth perspective on the defensive line. I'll put it another way. That's not the position where I would be a little concerned if they have an injury or two on the defense.
Would that be linebacker then?
Kind of linebacker, more safety.
Okay.
Um, Nick Morris Jr. is coming off of an injury. He's another one, kind of like Jaquez Moore. He played in the first couple games last year and then was kind of never heard from again. Believe the injury happened against Elon. Uh, they had so many injuries in the first week or two, and a lot of them were on that temporary turf at Northwestern. I'm thinking they're glad they don't have to go back up there to Chicago this year. Um, but yeah, Nick Morris Jr.'s back. Trey Freeman I mean, his tackle numbers weren't what they were the previous season, but I tend to think that's more a product of the system. Uh, Sometimes you want your defensive line to get tackles before your linebacker has to make a tackle. So I think linebacker they're okay. Like Kobe Smith behind them. Bradley Gompers is an incoming freshman who also was really highly ranked. I think I'm forgetting a name or two in there, but linebacker I think they're okay with depth. I think if either one of Freeman or Morris misses an extended period of time, they might be in a little bit of dire straits.
But yeah, the secondary, at least the starters look really, really good. And you mentioned Rivers, and I think Terry Moore is one of the coolest stories in college football, going from running back to being an all ACC safety. So I like this secondary.
So that's the problem.
Yeah.
I don't think Terry Moore is going to play other than about half the season. He had an injury in the bowl game that just kind of got swept under the rug because they looked so bad against Ole Miss, and it was just such a bludgeoning of a game. And you know, not making excuses for myself or anybody else on the Duke beat, but it's hard to cover spring practices when you have a basketball program that makes a run to the Final Four. Um, we did ask Manny about him in the spring, and Manny just kind of deflected it. I don't know if Manny and the guys talked about him at ACC kickoff. I don't think I was ever around when they were, but he suffered I don't want to say what the injury was because I'm not 100% sure what it is, but he suffered a significant enough injury in the Gator Bowl against Ole Miss that I don't think he's going to be available for the whole season. And I think it's a bad enough injury that if he plays the second half of the season, it'd kind of be a benefit for Duke. Like I think that's almost the expectation at this point. And if he's back in September, then they'll feel even better about it. I wouldn't rule that out, but this is this is a safety unit that is going to be missing its best player for at least the first few games.
Connor, I want to go back for just a second and talk about another transfer that wasn't brought up. Landon King at tight end. One of the things that, again, that you're outlining here, and you and Will have sort of laid the groundwork for me, is showing me an offense that is going to be moving from kind of a one-dimensional aspect with Malik, basically pass only, to a team that you never know what's going to come your way. It could be any of these running backs. It could be the quarterback. That's why I'm asking about this tight end, because I think that's another aspect here that can play a huge role in this offense. So tell us a little bit about Langdon.
Well,
So
they, I think, learned a lesson with tight end last year. They lost Jeremiah Hazley, who started the year as the starter. Again, man, that really was a bad trip to Chicago. They lost Jeremiah Hazley in the game at Northwestern. And then I think it was game six, right in the middle of the season, that they lost Nicky Dalmolin. It was either game six or game four, one of those. And they were down to basically one tight end in Jake Taylor. And Jake really got a lot better during the season, and at the point where the finale against Wake Forest, the regular season finale, he had a great game. But their number two option for tight end last year was Tony Boggs, who's a like 6'4", 290-pound converted offensive lineman that I don't think was ever targeted last year. So they get Jeremiah Hazley back. Nicky Dalmolin ran out of eligibility. But they get Hazley back. They get a much improved Jake Taylor back, who has been a half year starter at this point. And then you bring in another tight end in Landon King from Utah. Now you're talking about three starting caliber tight ends for a position that pretty much Duke is only going to have one on the field at a time. Maybe they go two at a time. It really does. It like you said, Jim. It gives them the ability to kind of mix up the personnel. And the more you can do that, the more you can take pressure off of a receiver unit that has a few question marks. Like we don't know that Quayshawn Brown is going to continue his ascension. We don't know if Samir Higgins is going to be consistent. We don't know how the transfers are going to pan out, how they're going to mesh with Darian. So when you're able to talk about putting, I always have to Google it and look up the numbers for the personnel groups. What's one running back and two tight end? Is that 12 personnel?
Yeah, I believe so.
I always, because I've covered Wake for so long, I've always just said it's 11 personnel, and I don't have to worry about which one is the is the tight end and which one's the running back.
Right.
But yeah, I think they'll be able to go with some 12 and 13 even if they really wanted to mix it up. I mean, Tony Boggs is still in there. You can anytime you can put a basically a sixth offensive lineman out there, you feel better about your goal line package. So they'll do some things offensively that they were kind of hamstrung and couldn't do last year.
I'm sorely tempted to do a really bad joke about having Mensa on Duke football. It's just, but I'm not going there. I think you can, everybody else can make whatever jokes, and I'm sure that there have been hundreds already. I'm not touching it.
I don't know. I heard Jake Taylor and I started thinking about the movie Major League. So
Tried to get as many of those of him pointing to center field.
yes.
Yeah, try to get those in there last year.
I think just again talking about this offense, I'm seeing a squad that can kill you dinking and dunking on the field with passes, and as you said, we're not really sure what Darian Mensah can do with the long ball for sure. I mean,
I think it's a downgrade from Malik, but like I said, I mean,
sure.
Malik, that thing looked like it was shot out of a cannon.
Few people can throw like that.
Yeah, I think if Darian Mensah can kind of throw deep balls, he's not going to be asked to throw as many of them, I don't think. And it's worth the downgrade in that aspect if you get the upgrade in everything else he brings to the table with being able to move him around, being able to put him in some RPOs, being able to slide a pocket or two. It really, I go back to thinking Duke won 9 games last year in the regular season. The one that everybody laments is the SMU game where they went 0 points on 6 turnovers. Everybody wants to blame Todd Polino, and I've gone blue in the face explaining to people that it's not Todd Polino's fault when a defensive lineman jumps the line. One of those was a bad operation too. Anyway, they were a 2 point conversion away from winning that game in overtime.
Yeah.
And the 2 point conversion play they called was a rollout for Malik Murphy, and he threw just a little bit wide of Eli Pankel. If he throws an on the money throw on the run, Duke wins that game. Duke might be playing in Charlotte at the end of the year, or Miami is. SMU isn't, and who knows where we're going. It's just that type of thing that I think there's such an upside with what Darian Mensah can bring to this offense.
So what I'm hearing and seeing is contrary to what Phil Steele is saying about Duke, and he's putting them in, I think, at about number 10 in the ACC. I would tend to think that is that's underestimating this team significantly based upon everything that is being laid out here. And you're talking about a team that does have the experience, more depth than it has in the past couple of years, plus more of an option to produce points and the ability to do that. It's going to be interesting to see how this season schedule plays out. And speaking of which, let's get into the season. Let's look at the schedule and give us a thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up for the win, thumbs down for the loss. And you can do the Will thumb flutter. If you want to, because this is an unusual season. We've got a lot to, maybe not as many transfer guys here, but everybody else is seemingly has been like 40 plus, and it's like nobody has any idea what's happening. So we'll extend you that same grace with the thumb flutter. So let's start out with the first game of the season. It is on Thursday, August 28th. It is Duke versus Elon, your alma mater.
Yeah, that's why I'm tempted to give it one of the flutters. But yeah, I mean it's the FCS game. I think Duke won last year's game like 27-3, something like that. I would expect a few more points out of Duke than they scored last year against Elon. But I'll plead complete ignorance. I have no idea what Elon has. I- I'm still several weeks away from needing to do that research.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody that is covering college sports right now can feel confident in coming up with stuff. To
Well,
be honest with you,
the problem is, typically, the team you cover. Then when people ask you about other teams, it's like, well, shit, I just know the roster that I know. Like,
right?
my
Good
my
luck.
priority is knowing the roster that I cover. In my case, two rosters that I cover. I don't know any. I know
Pass
very
that.
little when it comes to everybody else's roster.
Exactly. Yeah, there's an awful lot of information to digest, and it's hard to do that. The next game is on Saturday, September 6th. It is a game that's either going to be on ESPN or ABC. It's a noon game, and I think well worth our eyes. This is Duke and Illinois. Duke takes on Illinois. It is a home game for Duke. Illinois potential here. This is one of these teams. I don't know from season to season. Quite honestly, I have never been able to figure out. This is one of those teams. You just throw it up and see what hits the wall and what sticks.
Did you
So
know? Did you know they won 10 games last year?
yeah, and it's like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Mhm. And
Quite
Brett was
honestly.
arguing with the was the coach
Yeah,
last season during the
Shane
bowl
Beamer.
game. Yeah, he was arguing with Shane Beamer during the bowl game or whatever. Yeah, it was
yeah,
awesome.
Yep.
craziness. All right, Duke versus Illinois. Thumbs up or thumbs down, or a thumb flutter.
I think that's a legitimate flutter. I think this is a really sneaky good non-conference matchup. I've been told maybe it's not that sneaky. I tend to not see it when I look at the lists of like the top non-conference games in the season.
Mhm.
Just because it's not two top 10 teams, I think I think the winner of this game kind of puts themselves in a position to be a CFP dark horse. Illinois picked fourth in the preseason Big Ten poll. I assume Duke will be picked somewhere between like 6 and 9. I had him at 6. I don't know how much higher you can go. I think the ceiling for where somebody would pick him is 4. But yeah, this is going to be a really good game, and I think the whoever wins it's going to come out of it saying we just beat a really good team.
And I think that would be an accurate statement too, because this is just a game that I think is going to be so worth watching to tell us a lot about both teams, obviously. But if one team comes out, let's say Duke's coming out of this with a big win, hello, folks,
Yeah.
you may want to rethink your opinion of Blue Devils football at this point. Next game up was Saturday, September 13th. This is fun. Duke goes to New Orleans. It's Duke at Tulane. It is an 8 p.m. game. It'll be on ESPN2. This is one of these games that is close enough to when I normally take a little trip down to New Orleans to see family. I might be going to this game. My father-in-law actually, I think, attended Tulane briefly for law school or something like that. This might be a good excuse to get him out of the household and go to see a football game.
It's gonna be a crowd that wants a piece of Darian Mensah. I can tell you that.
You
If
think?
social media is not real life, but I know there were a lot of hurt feelings when he not only when he decided to transfer, but when he went into the portal and basically had his destination set 48 hours later.
Oof.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I can remember I was walking into a game at Cameron in December and passed him and then saw him in the back row, and I think I was looking at the announcement that he was going to enter the transfer portal, and the timestamp on the story was from like within 24 to 36 hours. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Rubbing the chin.
I mean, I'll give this a thumbs up for Duke. I think they should beat a G5 team, even if it's on the road, and even if it's a G5 team that has been, one of the class of the G5s for the last several years. They're an
Yeah.
established program at this point. But and I can see these week 2 and 3 games, I can see this going either way. If Duke beats Illinois and then has a letdown game at at Tulane, I don't know that I'd be that shocked. If Duke loses to Illinois and then goes down there and beats Tulane in that Hornets nest, that wouldn't be shocking. Um, I think the more shocking ones would be the same result in both of them, whether that's win-win or lose-lose. Um,
Just want everybody to keep in mind that when a conference realignment talk always pops up at this time of year, because there's so little to actually talk about in college sports. Sometimes we have to make things up, and I'm not pointing my fingers at anybody. But Tulane has been one of those teams that has been brought up repeatedly as a team that might be a good addition to the ACC down the road. I'm going to leave it that right there because there's a lot of things I can say about that, and I think that's for another time. So let's get into ACC competition because this is when things start firing up big time. Duke is going to take on NC State. The Wolfpack is going to come down from Raleigh to Durham. Basically, just going to throw a stone across the street, come down, but that should be one heck of a game. This strikes me as just being rock the house big time.
This is what I appreciate about Duke's schedule this year, compared to last year, is they jump into the deep end of the pool. Like this first 6 games of Duke's schedule, really, really 7 or 8 when you get down the line. It's a big boy schedule. It's big boy football. Past the mighty Phoenix or the Fighting Phoenix in week 1. Yeah, I mean they've had the upper hand against State the last couple years. They beat them starting Henry Beelan the fourth 2 years ago in a game that I think set offensive football back several decades. I think Henry, the winning quarterback, was 4 for 13 in that one. And then they went to Raleigh and won a game last year. And that was the one game that Malik Murphy had a rushing touchdown. Not that those have much bearing on this one. I mean, this is a tough test. I'm still here. Like I'm fluttering and wavering because
We got the flutter going on here, man.
They bring back CJ Bailey at quarterback. I understand NC State lost Tony Gibson as their defensive coordinator, but I kind of have just gotten into a mold of thinking they're going to have a good defense at NC State. Maybe this is the year they don't. They lost their entire secondary to the spring portal.
Yeah.
But it's always a tough matchup when you play NC State.
I will, this is going to follow basically what I've been saying in all of the previews so far. This is another one of those games that if the Pack loses to Duke, even if it's especially if it's a significant loss, Dave can pack his bags. He's gone. Okay. I got nothing against you personally, dude. I just think it's time for somebody else. Anyway, Duke at Syracuse is next. This could be an interesting game. Just the fact that when you go into Syracuse, that is just a place that is like it's got an evil mojo on people. It's just
it's a weird place, man.
Yeah.
It's nothing against the Dome. I've been up there a couple times. I've enjoyed my trips there. it's a weird place to play. Though I was up there long enough ago that it was still like in a wind vortex, and they had doors they had to seal one before you could open the other one. It was a little crazy. Um, this one I give a thumbs up. I don't feel good about it because I don't trust knowing what's going to happen in the dome. But I do trust year two under Manny is going to be better than year two under Fran. I think just based on how much Duke has coming back, just the nature of knowing that Duke had a lot less roster turnover and had a better retention rate.
So here's what Duke fans can do to help break that evil mojo at Syracuse. Go out and find these little troll dolls with the long hair, the little ugly mofos, and dye the hair blue. And then every time your team is on the field, you hold it up and you stroke the hair. Now, if anybody does that, you're strange. You're stranger than me for suggesting it. Next game up is Duke takes a West Coast trip to take on Cal.
Yeah, I think that one's a thumb. That one actually, I do feel good about the thumb up. I mean, I think the biggest difficulty there is just the 3,000-mile trip out west. Maybe I have East Coast bias or maybe still some old school ACC bias, but I picked Cal and Stanford at the bottom of the ACC. I just don't feel good about how much they've lost and having no idea of where they're going to get production from.
It's mighty big of you to admit to that East Coast bias, Connor.
I'm hoping it won't be the same in basketball, but honestly, it might be.
Well, we'll see about that. We got a break right after that, and then on Saturday, October 18th, it's Duke taking on Georgia Tech. Boy, now this is going to be another barn burner. Let's be blunt about that.
So this is the one I'll give a thumbs down to because I've long had a vendetta. I'll give Dave Clawson credit for this. He's the one that initially turned me on to it, and I've said for years and years that off weeks for college football players are not the advantage that they are for pro football players. It's a rhythm sport, and you get into routines and you go week to week, and usually every year without fail, college football teams after off weeks are about 500. They're not anywhere close to as successful as you think they should be, or you just would assume. So I think it's really tough to have an off week and then play a team that's as physical as Georgia Tech and that has an identity. Not that Duke isn't physical, because they have the outside perception, I'm sure, lags behind how physical Duke has become the last 3 years. But Georgia Tech is also made that part of its identity under Brent Key, and I'm so impressed with where they've gotten their program to, and then I would give them a little bit of the edge here.
Okay. So you just painted one hell of a bleak picture here because there's a break after this game too. And
there's three ACC teams with 2 off weeks in a 3-week stretch, and I didn't realize that Duke wasn't the only one until this past week. But Miami and Carolina also have those.
Yeah.
And all 3 of them play huge games in between their off weeks. Miami plays at Florida State. North Carolina plays Clemson in the middle. And then Duke has a home game against Georgia Tech. And it just, like, I've never tried to put together a schedule for 17 teams. I've never had to deal with the stress of that, but it seems like an avoidable mistake to have 3 out of your 17 teams have such a quirk in their schedule where they're playing one game in about a 27-day span.
Yeah. That's just wrong in a major way, and that can be avoided. That is all. Look, it's done by computer. It's very simple to program in what and how you want it done, and what to avoid, and that could have been avoided. Yeah. Oh, well. Saturday, November 1st, Duke takes on Clemson. So here we come out of that break. You're talking about this curse on college football teams taking breaks. Again, here we go. Duke has to travel down to Death Valley after having so much time off. What are we looking at
Yeah,
here?
I think Clemson's the best team in the league. They're my preseason pick to win this league. Just they're like I said, you don't know everybody else's roster nearly as well as you should. I do know Clemson's roster, and they're they're
Yeah.
they're pretty solid. I think they're not only a front runner for the ACC title. I think they could win a national championship this year.
Okay, we'll come back and visit you on that one. Duke at UConn. That's on CBS Sports at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's on Saturday, November the 8th.
Yeah, I think that's a win. I mean, it's like the quirk with 2 off weeks in a 3 week span. It's also a quirk for Duke to be playing 2 G5 road games. David Hale's done some work in the past couple of years about the oddity of how many ACC teams play those games, and I do think they need to come to an end. But some of that is just maneuvering a schedule, and if you're not Clemson, Florida State, Virginia Tech, if you're not getting into the Atlanta showcase games or the games out in Ireland or whatever, you do what you can to manipulate the budget. Um, Nowadays, more important than maybe it was 5 to 10 years ago when you have to skim 20.5 million off the top because you're paying players that. So I get it. It is weird to play 2 G5 road games in the same season, but at least this one's a little more manageable, I think, than the trip down to New Orleans.
Yeah, I agree there. I want everybody that's watching and listening to the program right now, that explanation that Connor just gave, rewind, listen to it a couple of times, and let it sink in. Okay. It's good explanation, says everything you need to know. Next game up, Duke takes on Virginia at home.
I think this one's a win. I don't have much faith in Tony Elliott's ability to build a competitive team. I think they're lagging pretty far behind. Um, I think Duke is on a different tier in the ACC in competitiveness than Virginia is.
Next game is going to be at Chapel Hill. Boy, you know,
Now I'm back to the Flutters.
when when it's not only basketball, but it's becoming football now. This is fun. It's just fun. So are you sticking with the Flutters on this game? Yeah, okay.
And this one has so much more to do with I have no idea what this Carolina team is going to look like. We
Nobody
know
does.
more. We know more about the 24-year-old girlfriend of the 73-year-old head coach than we do about what kind of scheme, what kind of personnel. Like, I know their quarterback is Gio Lopez. I know he came in the spring portal from South Alabama. I have a feeling they're going to throw to a slot receiver and some tight ends because that's what it looked like for the Patriots for so many years.
Yeah.
They just I think I saw somebody say they had either 70 or 80 new players on this roster.
Holy smokes.
To me, they're the biggest question mark in the ACC. You just have no idea what they're going to look like. Shit, they were running around in spring practices with no numbers or names on their jerseys.
Oh, smart
Even the
guy.
coaches don't know what they're going to look like.
Darth Hoodie, up to his old ways. Okay. Yeah, I've heard that Gronk is coming out of retirement too. I don't know how they worked that one out, but yeah.
Where's Wes Welker?
Yeah.
I think he's in coaching.
Yeah,
I've seen something about he's in coaching.
yeah. Wrapping the regular season up, it's again, it's within the state. It's Duke, Wake Forest. This is a Wake Forest team that it's not the same without Dave Clawson. Simple as that.
Yeah. I give this a thumbs up and apologize for any Wake Forest people that would hold that against me.
Crossover.
It's kind of the same explanation that I gave for Virginia. Duke is is further along of a program, even though they're in year two of a coach. They've won 9, 8, and 9 games the last 3 years. Wake is trying to put the pieces back together after back-to-back 4-8s. They're trying to do it with a new coach. They're trying to do it with a legitimate quarterback battle. It's not just a quarterback battle in uh, symbolic terms. Like you genuinely don't know who their starter is going to be between Robbie Ashford and Deshaun Purdy. Um, I just I think of a ceiling and a floor for Wake this year, and I think of a ceiling and a floor for Duke, and I think the difference in where those programs are is a little bit too much for me to pick against Duke.
Yeah.
Let's be real, no matter what answer you gave there, it was going to upset somebody.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the nature of when that game comes around on the
Mhm.
calendar.
Yep. Yep. We did not mention up front. We said that he's the publisher of Devils Illustrated. We did not mention the fact that he's also publishing something for the Deeks as well.
Yep.
So, but we did that on purpose. And now you understand a little more if you did not know. But it looks to me like you've got another bowl bound team here. Is that pretty much what you're seeing?
I think that's kind of the floor for this program right now. I think another 8 or 9 win season should be achievable, and I think this is a team that can dream of getting to double digit wins. I think you're not expecting Duke to be in Charlotte playing Clemson or Miami or somebody like that, but if that happened, I don't think it'd be the most shocking outcome of this league. Like I look at it as Clemson, SMU, Miami with Clemson first, and then the other two, whatever order you want. They're spending the most. They probably have the most talent in the league. They should be at the top of the league. I think there's a chunky next tier of teams that could wind up in Charlotte, and I think that's Louisville. I think it's Georgia Tech, and I would throw Duke into that mix with them. I maybe Pitt, maybe UNC, maybe State. If things come together, it's all about who actually stays healthy. I mean, Pitt could wind up there. Pitt just won an ACC championship not long ago. So, but I would throw Duke right into that mix of teams that, no, you're not expecting them to compete for an ACC championship, but if they were there, if we're talking about them in late November with like this, and this have to happen for them to make it to Charlotte, I, I wouldn't be shocked.
Interesting stuff. I'll tell you. Definitely bowl bound. I mean, that's for sure. And uh, in the back of my mind, and I really am not a big person to put a lot of credence into top 25 rankings and stuff like that. But at what point, let's say they beat Illinois. They beat Tulane and they beat NC State. Is this team ranked in the top 25 at that point?
Yeah, I would kind of hope if they beat Illinois, they would at least be getting votes. And I would say there's a outside chance they're in the top 25 if they beat Illinois.
Okay.
They'll get docked because they're at home. Um, Probably get docked more than they should because I don't know how much of a home field advantage they'll actually have for a noon in early September. It's going to be hot.
Oh.
That's going to be a steamy one. But yeah, I mean, if they win all four of those, I would think not just ranked. I would think ranked fairly high, like top. I don't know, maybe top 15. You never know how those things play out. I've been a believer that we shouldn't have preseason polls because they just taint the poll for
Yeah.
most of the season, if not all of it. But yeah, 4-0 with those types of wins, I would think probably top 15.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we'll see. Will, got anything else up your sleeve?
I did check, and you were
Other than
correct.
that?
Wes Welker is a coach. He's with the Washington Commanders. But
Okay.
yeah, I just got one final question, and we've talked about it. You're in a unique position where you cover two teams, both obviously in the ACC. What is a game day like when they're playing each other for you? How different is it?
It's It's kind of a double-edged sword. They wind up playing on the last game of the season more often than not, and so I spend the entire year having to track one of them while I'm going to the other one, or I can rarely pull off 2 games in a day. I call that a 2 games Courtney. It's a stupid reference with a bunch of my buddies down here. But mainly for football, it's uh, when that game rolls around, part of it is relief because I'm not having to split my brain in half, and one half is paying attention to my computer screen, and the other half is paying attention to what's going on through a press box window in front of me. The post game is when it gets hectic, and when I've just basically had to make the call of whoever wins, I'm doing their post game. Um, I regretted that a little bit last year because that wound up being Dave Clawson's last post game presser.
Mm.
I didn't know that at the time. Obviously, if I'd had the foresight that 3 weeks later he'd be resigning, then I would have gone to his post game. Um, but typically, you guys know how it is. I mean,
Yeah.
the team that wins the game, their fans are actually going to want to read about it. The team that loses the game, some fans are still going to want to read, but it's going to be less readership.
Yep.
Unless you're taking them to task. But yeah,
It is what it is, my man.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just is what it is.
I'm always happy to not have to split my brain in half when that game rolls around.
Yep.
Good. Yeah. I do not envy that at all. It's difficult enough to cover one team effectively, but when you're doing two, that just man, better man than me, Connor. It doesn't take much to do that, though. I will just throw that little edge in there for you. Hey, our thanks to Connor O'Neill, the publisher of Devils Illustrated, for joining us and providing us with a great Duke Blue Devils football preview on ACC Nation. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Connor. Appreciate it.
ACC Nation, your source for ACC sports coverage with Will and Jim. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on our podcast, streaming radio, and YouTube. Connect with us on Blue Sky, Reddit, Instagram, Threads, Mastodon, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn.